Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Mega Tasiya Kuswandari and I'm from TBIA. And now I will talk a lot about education in Indonesia. As we know, Indonesia have a big problem in their education. So I will talk a lot about the solution and problem, or the problem and solution about Indonesia education. So we believe that education is the best way to make all of the countries to be a great country. Of course, with education we can exchange our life to be a good life, rich and wealth. Education is the way to make our generation to be a good human resource who can manage our natural resource to be more useful value. Without education, the country cannot be a rich country which has prosperity and smart society. The big country is always built by a good education system. So what is the challenges in the education system, of course, in Indonesia? As of now, Indonesia struggles to provide inclusive, high-quality education to its citizens. The country has much lower literacy levels than those of other Southeast Asian nations. An analysis by the World Bank shows that 55% of Indonesians who complete school are functionally illiterate, compared with only 14% in Vietnam and 20% in member countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And another problem is about national final examination. For the example, like Ujian Nasional in Indonesia, UN system. Government makes national standard to complete studying in every education level. Government forces all of the students from different school background with different quality to pass national examination, whereas the quality of Indonesian school have not equivalent yet. Most of people do not agree with our UN system, but government insists to maintain the system because it is the project of Minister of Education to spend APBN or APBN budget. Our APBN budget in 2012 is about 1,435 trillion. Budget for education is more than 20%, about 286.6 trillion, and budget for UN program is 518 billion. Is it a fantastic budget, isn't it? Imagine, with so much budget of education, government is supposed to improve our school condition and may be able to make our school equivalent each other, erase disparity and quality gap of education. Measure. Of course, it is measure student intelligence not only from cognitive ability but also affective and psychomotor. In fact, standard to pass final national examination just cognitive value. Since the mid-2000s, Indonesia has implemented a broad range of education reforms, including the decentralization of parts of its school system, improvements in teacher training standards, and level increase in education spending, a share of the national budget. However, public education spending as a percentage of GDP has stagnated over the past decade and remains well below recommended levels for emerging economies. One problem has been handled, but there are many fundamental problems of education again. Next problem is about my big question, which until now have been answered, that our education just produce unemployment people. Well-educated people who has graduated from university are only new work seekers. They are impossible accommodated by available job field. And then we have so much overload natural research. But why our education unable to administer it by producing human research who can manage our ground, land, farmland, forest, water, fuel, coal, gas, and etc. For our prosperity, why? That is wrong with our education. Why have Indonesians' education failed to build our country and to get it the best way for Indonesian society world? So, we talk about in brief the education system of Indonesia. Modern education was introduced in Indonesia during the era of Dutch colonial rule. When traditional school systems like Islamic boarding school or pesantren were supplemented with Dutch language school for the children or colonialists and local administrative elites. After independence in 1945, Indonesia constitutionally enshrined education as a right of all Indonesian citizens and sought to establish a more egalitarian and inclusive mass education system. Although public education is mostly secular and Indonesia is formally a secular state, Islamic education is highly prominent in Indonesia's large private education sector. So, the challenges. For example, children in Indonesia stand a better chance of being in school than ever before. Yet around 4.4 million children and adolescents aged 7 until 18 years are still out of school. The poorest children, children with disabilities, and children living in underdeveloped parts of the country are most at risk of school exclusions. For example, 13 to 50 years old junior secondary school children from the poorest households are 5 times more likely to be out of school than those from the wealthiest households. So what is the solution all of this problem? UNICEF works with the government of Indonesia to improve access to and quality of education for the most marginalized children aged 3 until 18 years, including children with disabilities and those in humanitarian situations. Reducing the high numbers out of school children remains a key priority for Indonesia to achieve sustainability development goal for an inclusive and equitable education by 2030. UNICEF support focuses on evidence generation, policy advocacy, and system strengthening for equitable access to education, improve learning outcomes, and skill development for adolescents. So the way that we can change our education system of problem, like first, charge the government's promise for increased education budget become 20%. Every candidate or president usually promise if she or he becomes president, she or he will increase the education budget up to 20%. But until now, that promise still only promise. Whereas 20% of education budget is messaged in 1945 Indonesian constitutions. With more funds, the government can improve the infrastructure and increase subsidy for university. Second, improve the infrastructure and education facilities. Equality of infrastructure in our country become one of serious problem. Students can learn well if there is good infrastructure and facility. But we shouldn't judge this problem as main problem. The infrastructure and facility are our problems too. And the third, we can increase subsidy for university by different distribution. The solution appears if the education budget is realized. At this time, by the government invested most of state university get subsidy. The subsidy is different from each university. For example, recently the government decreased the subsidy for Gajah Mada University and shifted it to another university, especially outside of Java. So that is the problems and solution about education in Indonesia. I hope it's useful for us and I'm sorry for any mistake. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye in another change.